Some of the most iconic items in Diablo 2 used to look completely different. Many items were drastically changed in the first few years of updates to the game. But what sorts of implications could pre-patch items from 20 years ago have on future patches of Diablo 2 Resurrected? In celebration of you helping me hit 50k subs on this channel, we're bringing back a classic series, the history of Diablo 2. Let's dive in. Many veterans of D2 reminisce about old versions of builds they used to play in Lord of Destruction, but it's hard to picture what those builds even looked like nowadays. Many of the core items have changed substantially. There was a point in history where the Diablo devs believed that they made a mistake with regard to vitality bonuses on a lot of items. Many of us recognize the iconic armor Arcane's Valor in all of its glory and in what it looks like today. But in patch 1.08, the armor looked a bit different. Not only will seasoned players notice a boost to fire resist on this armor, but a massive boost to base vitality and base life. Before the days of Enigma, that might have been considered OP, but forcing a player to make a choice these days may actually be very interesting. Other items also included vitality bonuses that were later removed in the recent versions. For example, this is Skolder's Ire in its current form, but in patch 1.08, it also had a bonus to vitality inherently on it, along with a bit more magic damage reduced. The old school version of B-Star may also be an example of this overreaction to a vitality bonus, although with that item, increased attack speed and elemental damage was added as well. But base vitality wasn't the only form of absolutely vicious life boosts back in the day. Many people still debate whether or not the newer version of Harlequin Crest, or Shako, is better than its 08 counterpart. The big difference being that the newer version of Shako has a base boost to life, mana, and an inherent 10% damage reduced. The 08 version increased its users' maximum life total by 40%. That being the case, it would be cool if two versions of this helm could drop today. Ariat's Face is the go-to helm for a lot of barb builds these days, while the 09 version has a boost to attack rating. The old version had a boost to max damage based on character level and minus 15% target defense. If you dive deeply into the calculations of AR and defense, that might have actually been a better stat. While both versions of this helm are certainly good, some PvP players miss the original version of Ariat's Face. The Druid helm, Jalal's Mane, also used to look quite a bit different. In its 08 counterpart, it actually had 25% crushing blow on the helm, and oddly enough, knockback. Later, these stats were removed for resistances, attack rating bonus, strength, and an additional +1 to shapeshifting skills. Another item that's sort of debatable as to whether or not the older or newer version is better are the unique war gauntlets known as Hellmouth. Many argue that the older version in 1.08 were actually better, mainly because they were gloves that gave not only fire resist, but the long sought after ability of cannot be frozen, something that doesn't exist on nearly as many items nowadays as it should. The Herald of Zakarum unique gilded shield used to have that ability on it as well, but some would argue the stats on the newer version of the shield make up for losing that ability. But some items were simply made worse. One that particularly stands out is Vampire Gaze. The older versions used to be more sought after because of their added damage reduction that was inherent on the helm. With physical damage reduction being something that is again very hard to come by, it's interesting that this change was ever made. Another item that most PvP players would argue was made worse is Valkyrie Wing. In patch 1.08, this thing was savage. This breakpoint breaker helm had 30% faster run walk, 30% faster attack speed, 30% faster cast, and 30% faster hit recovery. Someone really missed the theme though, putting 35 defense on this thing. What were they thinking? Azurath is an extremely rare, unique phase blade that most players only seek out to satisfy their Holy Grail list these days. Back in the day, it used to spawn as a crystal sword, and the level requirement was 13. Level 18 duelers used to love this sword, and in fact, after the patch, it was very highly sought after and extremely expensive. The only semi-comparable counterpart that exists today is Cleglaw's Tooth. Many people remember the Grandfather Colossus blade, while many people attribute the introduction of new, very powerful rune words to its eventual demise. Patch 1.09 might have actually done more damage to it than anything. While the enhanced damage was a bit lower, it had a massive bonus to attack rating compared to its newer counterpart. But on top of having 175 to life on the sword, it also increased its user's maximum life total by 25%. along with their mana. The legendary Storm Shield, which now spawns on a Monarch, used to spawn on an Aegis, boasting a higher base block percentage. Eagle Horn used to add minimum and maximum damage along with lightning damage instead of having +1 to Amazon skills and 25 to dexterity. And probably one of the most regrettable changes to assassins everywhere were the changes that were made to Bartuk's claws. These things actually used to be good, but unfortunately the newer version never finds its way into any build. Not all of the changes that were made to items from the 08 patch were bad ones. Some of them just straight improved the items. For example, this is an older version of the Bull Cathos wedding band ring. And here's a look at the pre-patch version of Gold Wrap versus its newer counterpart. Even the unique ring Ravenfrost used to be not only significantly different, but significantly worse. The same could also be said for Gore Riders. The old school version of High Lord's Wrath, instead of spawning with 20% increased attack speed on it, used to spawn with 30% faster run walk. The unique champion sword Doombringer was also given an update in patch 1.09. The unique Luna Black Oak Shield was just straight upgraded in the patch and still fails to find its way into any builds. But quite possibly one of the most disappointing changes was the changes made to Windforce. The only real difference between the two versions of these bows is that the newer version has 15 total stats, while the older version had 35. It's crazy to think that these changes were deemed necessary back in the day, with the devs believing that some items were too weak and others were too powerful. As we look back at the history of this game, I can't help but think about the future. Should some 08 items be brought back? Will any items be updated to fit a more modern playstyle of the game? Be sure to let me know what you think down below. While the Diablo franchise marches on and focuses on future titles, it might be equally important to pay homage to this legendary game. Thank you again for helping me hit 50K subs. It truly does mean a lot. Cheers to you, and here's to 50K more.